Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu.
Bilateral relations between the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Republic of Uganda are warm and cordial. And in my view, that is as a result of the commitment of the political leadership of our countries over time. You may wish to know that we have had exchange of visits at a very high level, and also visits by other government officials. That would not have been the case if the relations between our countries were not warm and cordial. And so far, as Uganda's representative in Nigeria, I am satisfied with the status of our relationships, and we are really working hard to make sure that we even make it more warmer, more cordial, so that we can scale up cooperation between our countries to benefit not just governments, but the people of Uganda and the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Because of the relationship between our countries, it has been possible for the private sector in Nigeria to do business in Uganda. We have had investments in the areas of banking, insurance, oil and gas, and we have also had technical cooperation in the area of education. Because of our good relations, there has been a trade between our countries, albeit at a very low level. The last information that I have indicates that our annual trade in terms of exports from Nigeria to Uganda do not exceed $10 million US. And the same applies to what we bring from Uganda to Nigeria. That is something that we need to address, primarily because if we scale up trade between our countries, we are widening the scope of growth of our private sector. The more we sell to one another between Uganda and Nigeria, the more we will encourage the producers of those products to invest more and produce more. And as you know, the more you invest, the more jobs you create. Once you create more employment, that will ultimately impact on the standard of living of the people that we are representing. We can also say that because of our warm relationships, we have been able to see the movement of people between our countries for tourist purposes. Significantly, every year on the 3rd of June, we have been able to see an increasing number of Nigerians going to Uganda for purposes of participating on our Martyrs' Day. You know, some time back, one of the traditional leaders killed very many believers because of their faith. And we commemorate that as an annual event. It happens to be a public holiday in Uganda. So when you look at the investment, when you look at the trend between our countries, when we look at tourist activities, when we look at technical cooperation in the area of education, in the area of oil and gas, in the area of mineral exploitation and exploration, all these have contributed to the economic development of our countries. But there is still room for improvement. And there are now new existing frameworks that we can leverage on for that improvement to happen. One of them is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In my view, what requires to be done is, first and foremost, there must be a political will on the part of leaders across Africa to lend their weight into the implementation of this framework. Once that is there, then we go to stage two. Stage two is to create the awareness, especially amongst the private sector, so that they get to appreciate the fact that this framework is to benefit them, not to benefit politicians. Because that framework opens doors for movement of goods across borders, for movement of services across borders, for movement of people across borders, which has not been the case before the coming into force of this framework. Now, there will be challenges, and that's where governments need to come in. For example, it's possible that there can be some losers in the process. Now, if that is going to be the case, then governments must be keen to work with the Secretariat in Accra to address the question of inequalities, so that even the losers know that, yes, I am going to lose from this perspective, but we are going to be compensated in the following way. That is very, very essential. And I would want that the Secretariat, right now, the good thing is spearheading the process of mobilizing resources for purposes of compensating those states that are going to be fairly disadvantaged. I wouldn't want to use the word losers, but disadvantaged in the implementation of this. The other thing that we need to focus on is, given the fact that the critical players in the implementation of this framework are the private sector, we need to build the capacity of the private sector to be able to leverage on the advantage of this framework. For that to happen, governments must put in money to assist the private sector build the capacity that they will need for them to trade under this framework. Some countries have already keyed into that. Just recently, the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area was in Uganda, and we had a very good discussion with him. The future looks bright, but what is critical is there must be political will, there must be general awareness, there must be a deliberate effort to build the capacity of the private sector to participate in this trade. Short of that, then it can remain a red herring. We have started producing cocoa in Uganda, but still in very low quantities. Now, we welcome very much the idea that the cocoa produced from Nigeria, or indeed West Africa, ends up in Uganda. Why? Because we will be contributing to the growth of the economy in Nigeria. There is one thing that I would like all the stakeholders to appreciate at this moment in time. Over the last 2.5 years or so, we have had COVID pandemic. This pandemic has affected all our economies negatively. But I think there's a silver lining in that during the lockdown, for example, it was very, very difficult for anybody in Africa to take a product outside Africa. But it was still possible for you to move a product from Uganda, from Nigeria to Cameroon, from Nigeria to any other African country. We must build on that. When more and more cocoa leaves Nigeria for Uganda, it means that you are going to boost the production of cocoa. Because the farmer will be aware that there is market for his or her product. When you, of course, you are not going to sell us beans. We would want a final product. So what that means is that value must be added to that cocoa. In the process of adding value to that cocoa, you are creating employment. In the process of creating that employment, the people who are going to be paid salaries will pay some taxes. And the person who is going to export the cocoa will pay taxes. That goes to the coffers of government to provide the badly required services to the population. The same with Uganda. That's what we are doing to our coffee, our tea. And we would appreciate very much that we can have that exchange of goods. It's not only coffee, tea that we are producing. I wish after this, these people were given some tea to take. It's not only tea that we can bring here. We have coffee. More importantly, we have got milk and milk products. We have the different types. There is a type that can last for 7 days in the shelves. There is the pasteurized one which can last much longer. Then there is powdered milk. So apart from cocoa, tea, coffee, and other products, why don't we scale up the exchange of these products within Africa so that all this money remains in Africa? Right now, there is a shortage of foreign exchange across sub-Saharan Africa. Why? Because the entire continent imports more than it's producing, and that disadvantages us. And yet, the raw materials are here. The Nescafe that you buy from a supermarket, a coffee comes from Africa. And the person selling the beans, maybe 1 kilogram, doesn't even cost $1. But how many dollars are you paying for this small tin of Nescafe that is in our shelves here in Abuja? So at 60 years old, at 62 years old, we should now be talking about scaling up trade between our countries, amongst our countries. We should be talking about encouraging cross-border investments between our countries, amongst our countries. We should be talking about visiting our African countries. It is very disheartening that for me who comes from Uganda, you find somebody asking me, how is Nigeria? And yet that person has visited Europe more than 10 times, sometimes for leisure. So why don't you explore your continent? Why don't we explore your continent? Why don't we send our children to West Africa, send our children to East Africa, to Southern Africa, to North Africa to study? When we talk about the integration of the continent, it's not governments that integrate, it's people. For that to happen, you must appreciate what is happening in East Africa. And it must happen what is happening in West Africa. We have the building blocks already in place. Let us make use of them. East African Community, ECOWAS, SADC, those are building blocks. Leverage on them, use those blocks to integrate our continent. So the opportunities are immense. It needs us to put our act together and be able to do that. Importantly, yes, we can talk about the need for trade, for investment, for tourism, etc. Even cross-border education. But I think the beginning point must be a mindset change. If right now you went to a supermarket and you find Ugandan tea in the shelves, you find the tea, for example, from England, or the tea from India. In most cases, you are likely to buy the tea from England. Why? Because mentally, you are prepared to think that it's better quality. It is not. Let us decolonize our minds. And once we do that, we will encourage trade, cross-border investment, tourism, education, people-to-people interaction. We have so many shared values that we can take advantage of. There are so many similarities between the way you do things here and the way we do in Uganda. That's one. Then two, linguistically, there are certain words that I can hear some people speak here, and I can locate or I can associate with that word with a certain dialect in Uganda. I will give you an example. Some time back this year, I hosted a friend who works with the World Health Organization here in Abuja. And she comes from Akwa Ibom. My housekeeper speaks one of the Ugandan dialects. And so I was communicating with that person in that Ugandan dialect. Now my visitor picked one word and asked me, Your Excellency, what does that word mean? And I said, it means come. And she said, that exactly is what it means in my language. I said, you see? So we are the same people. Our borders were artificially placed by the colonizers. So if we have got those similarities, it makes our interaction easier. So the Nigerians are friendly people, they are happy people, they enjoy life, you know, and that is what life is about. As a matter of fact, I've even attended some marriages where Nigerians have married Ugandans, and vice versa. So Nigeria, apart from our values, the shared values, has got the potential to develop to a level where everybody in the country enjoys. And the same applies to Uganda. What does it require? It requires all the stakeholders to play their rightful roles. Governments play their role of creating an environment which is enabling for every stakeholder to engage in an economic activity. The private sector to play their rightful roles, and I must add, you in the media to play your rightful roles. When you listen to the foreign media report about Africa, 90% of what they say is not good news. And so we must tell our own story. Once we tell our own story, that will benefit our people. And it will in the long run force those who want to distort our story, to distort our history, to begin thinking or looking at things differently. Nigeria, Uganda, Africa is the future of the world. Let us all play our rightful roles.